I'm writing this from my laptop, which is balanced on a wobbly kitchen table, and I still can't feel my hands properly. It's not from the cold, but from the kind of adrenaline that leaves you shaky and hollowed out. Today was supposed to be the day everything ran out. I mean, completely. I've been unemployed for 4 months. My savings are a joke, and all I had left in this world was a few coins I'd scraped together from old coat pockets and the back of the sofa. €3 and 27 cents, to be exact. My daughter, Lily, is only 6 months old, and she hasn't had a proper feed all day. That little pile of change was my last shot at getting her a can of formula. It's a feeling I wouldn't wish on anyone. That specific kind of terror where your child's hunger is a physical weight on your own chest. The walk to the supermarket felt like miles, even though it's just down the street. Every step was a prayer. Please let the formula be the price I remember. Please don't let me have miscounted. I had Lily strapped to my chest, and her little whimpers felt like tiny stabs in my heart. I tried to hum to her, but my throat was too tight. I clutched the coins in my pocket so hard that the edges were digging into my palm. It's funny, you walk past these places 1,000 times and never really see them. But today, every crack in the pavement, every person rushing by with their shopping bags full, felt like a personal insult. They were living in a different world, one where €3 and 27 cents wasn't the line between feeding your baby and, well, I couldn't let my mind go there. Inside the store, it was somehow worse. The lights were so bright, and there was music playing, this cheerful, upbeat pop song that felt completely out of place with the panic clawing at my throat. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, and made a beeline for the baby aisle. It felt like I was a ghost, just drifting through this world of abundance that wasn't for me. Stacked high with food, with treats, with things people buy without a second thought. I just focused on my mission, repeating the brand name in my head like a mantra. And then I saw it, the familiar blue and white can. My heart actually skipped a beat. I reached out, my hand trembling a little, and turned it over to see the price tag, $3.27. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. It was okay. It was going to be okay. I held the can to my chest, cool and solid and real. It felt like a trophy. I walked to the checkout with what I think was the first bit of confidence I'd felt all day. There was only one person ahead of me, so I wouldn't have to stand there long. I placed the can on the black conveyor belt, a single, lonely item. The cashier, a young guy who looked bored out of his mind, barely glanced at me as he scanned it. Beep. I started lining up my coins on the counter, ready to slide them over. But then I looked up at the little screen, the one that shows the total. It wasn't $3.27. It was $3.77. My blood ran cold. 50 cents. I was 50 cents short. The world just stopped. I stared at that number and then at my pathetic little pile of coins. My face was burning, a hot, prickly shame that started in my neck and spread everywhere. I could feel the person behind me shifting their weight, impatient. My mouth went completely dry. I just stood there, pushing the coins around with my finger as if a 50-cent piece was just gonna materialize out of thin air. The cashier sighed, a really loud, annoyed sound. "So, do you have the rest or not?" he asked, not even looking at me, already focused on the next customer. I could hear Lily starting to fuss again, her little noises cutting right through the haze of my shame. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I couldn't even form words to explain. What would I say? Sorry, I'm a failure and I can't even buy my daughter food? My pride, what was left of it, just wouldn't let me. I felt my eyes start to sting, and I just gave the can a tiny, defeated pushback towards him. It was over. I had to walk out of there empty-handed. And then, just as I was turning to leave, A hand reached past me and placed a 10-euro note on the counter. It wasn't rough or hurried. It was a slow, deliberate movement. "I'll take care of this," a man's voice said. It was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the store, of my own panic. I flinched and looked up. Standing beside me was a man in a dark, expensive-looking coat, the kind you don't see in this neighborhood. He wasn't looking at the cashier. He was looking at the can of formula. There was something in his eyes, a deep sadness that felt incredibly out of place. He didn't look at me with pity, which I was expecting. He just looked tired and sad. I was so stunned that I couldn't even say thank you. I just stared at him, completely frozen. The cashier snatched the note, his boredom momentarily replaced by a flicker of interest as he handled the money. He processed the transaction, the register beeped, and he pushed the change in the bagged can of formula across the counter. The man didn't take the change. He just nudged the bag and the pile of coins and notes gently in my direction. "This is for you," he said, his voice still low and even. I felt like I was moving through water, my limbs heavy and slow. I picked up the bag, the weight of it familiar and yet completely foreign. My hand brushed against his as I gathered the change, and his skin was cold. I mumbled something. I think it was, "I can't," but the words came out as a whisper, and he either didn't hear or chose to ignore it. He just nodded slightly, as if to say, "Just take it and go." I practically fled the store, bursting out into the cool afternoon air, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to breathe, to get away from the sterile lights and the silent judgment. I half expected him to be gone when I turned around, to have just vanished like some weird guardian angel. But he was there, standing a few feet away on the pavement. He wasn't leaving. He wasn't looking at me, either. His gaze was fixed on the top of Lily's head, just visible out of the top of her carrier. The sad look was still there, but it was deeper now, mixed with something else I couldn't read. It made me incredibly uncomfortable. I finally found my voice, or a version of it. "Thank you," I managed to say. "You didn't have to do that." He just blinked slowly, as if coming back from somewhere far away. He didn't say, "You're welcome." He just kept looking at Lily with that same intense, hollowed-out expression. It felt like he wasn't really seeing a baby, but a memory of one. "Do you have family to help you?" he asked, his voice flat. The question was so direct, so personal, it caught me completely off guard. I clutched the carrier a little tighter, a protective instinct kicking in, even though he hadn't made any kind of threat. It was just weird. Strangers don't ask you that. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. "No," I finally croaked out. "It's just us." The words hung in the air between us, feeling stark and miserable. He nodded again, but it was a slow, heavy gesture, as if my answer confirmed something terrible he already suspected about the world. He finally tore his eyes away from Lily and looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. "This is going to sound strange," he started, and my entire body tensed up. "I'm in a position to help. Not just with 50 cents. He gestured back at the store. "I'm starting something. A project. A foundation. It's meant to help people who fall through the cracks. People who are one small bit of bad luck away from disaster." He said it all in that same monotone, as if he were discussing a business deal, but his eyes were filled with that raw sadness. "I want to help you. Properly. I want you to be the first person my foundation supports." I just stared at him, my mind unable to catch up. A foundation? What was he talking about? A moment ago, I was humiliated over loose change, and now this millionaire, he had to be a millionaire, was offering me a job? A rescue package? It felt like a dream, but also a trap. My brain just short-circuited. I couldn't connect the man in front of me to the words he was saying. A foundation? Help me? People don't just do that. There's always a catch, always a price. And I had absolutely nothing left to give. My first thought, honestly, was that he was dangerous, that this was some kind of elaborate, twisted trick. I took an involuntary step back, pulling Lily's carrier even closer to my body. "Why?" I asked, and the word came out sharper than I intended. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" I was searching his face for any sign of a lie, any flicker of manipulation, but all I could find was that same deep, unshakable grief. He looked like a man who had lost everything, trying to build something new from the wreckage, and for some insane reason, he had decided to start with me. He didn't seem offended by my suspicion. In fact, he looked like he expected it. He just gave another one of those slow, tired nods. "Because I have to," he said, and it sounded more like a confession than an explanation. He reached into his coat again, and for a second I flinched, but he just pulled out a wallet, and from it a thick, heavy business card. He held it out to me. "You don't have to decide anything now. That would be crazy." His voice was calm, reassuring. "This is the number for my office. If you want to talk, if you want to see if this is real, just call. There are no strings attached, I promise." I looked down at the card. The name on it was Alexander Dubois. It sounded as expensive as his coat. My fingers closed around the thick paper, and it felt like the heaviest thing I had ever held. And with that, he seemed to decide the conversation was over. He gave me one last lingering look, and there was something in it that wasn't pity. It was almost like recognition. Then he turned and walked away down the street, his footsteps quiet and measured. He didn't look back. A little way down the block, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The kind of car that's so clean and shiny it looks like it belongs on a different planet. A driver got out and opened the back door for him. He got in without a word, and the car just glided away, disappearing around the corner. I was left standing there on the pavement, feeling the breeze get a little colder. In one hand, I had a plastic bag with a can of baby formula and about €6 in change. In the other, I had a business card that felt like it could either save my life or ruin it. The walk home was a complete blur. I don't remember my feet hitting the pavement. I don't remember passing any of the familiar landmarks. My mind was just a mess of replays, spinning the last 20 minutes over and over again. The cashier's annoyed face, the man's sad eyes, the feel of that heavy cardstock between my fingers. I kept looking down at Lily, who was finally sleeping soundly, her little belly blissfully unaware of the drama that had just unfolded for her sake. One problem, the most immediate and terrifying problem, had been solved. I could feed my daughter tonight. But this man, Alexandre Dubois, hadn't just solved one problem. He had created 1,000 new ones, 1,000 questions that were now screaming in the sudden silence of my mind. Hope is a terrifying thing when you haven't had any for a long time. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was deafening. After the noise of the store and the chaos in my own head, my tiny, threadbare living room felt like a different universe. Everything here spoke of my failure. The peeling paint, the single lamp that flickers, the stack of final notice bills on the counter. I walked straight to the kitchen and placed the can of formula on the worn countertop. It looked so bright and new in the dim light. Then I took the business card out of my pocket and placed it right next to the can. The two of them sat there side by side. My desperate reality and this impossible, terrifying promise. I just stared at them, this simple can and this fancy card. My whole life, the one I had a half hour ago, and the one that might exist now, summed up in two objects on a countertop. My hands were shaking as I opened the can, the little hiss of the seal breaking sounding incredibly loud in the quiet room. I went through the motions of making Lily's bottle, actions I've done 1,000 times, but that felt completely new today. The scoop of powder, the warm water, the shake of the bottle, it was all automatic. I lifted a sleepy Lily from her carrier and sat down in my one old armchair. As soon as the bottle touched her lips, she started drinking, this desperate, hungry sound that melted into a quiet, contented rhythm. I just held her, watching her little eyes close as her belly filled. In that moment, with her warm and safe in my arms, the shame and the fear and the confusing man with the sad eyes all just faded away. There was only this perfect, quiet peace. After I laid Lily down in her crib, watching her chest rise and fall in a deep, peaceful sleep, the quiet of the apartment became my enemy again. The relief I felt was like a tide, and as it receded, it left all the sharp-edged questions exposed on the shore. I was drawn back to the kitchen, back to the card sitting next to the formula. Alexandra Dubois. I picked it up again, running my thumb over the embossed letters. What kind of person does this? Who walks around with so much money and so much sadness, just handing out lifelines? My skepticism came flooding back, cold and familiar. This had to be a dream. In the morning, I'd wake up, the can of formula would be empty, the card would be gone, and Lily would be hungry again. That felt more real than this story of a billionaire benefactor appearing out of thin air.
Absent-mindedly picked up the pile of change from the counter, the change from his €10 note, and started counting it. My rent was due in a week, and every cent mattered. The formula was €3.77, so the change should have been €6.23. But as I separated the coins and the one €5 note, my fingers froze. The total wasn't right. It wasn't €6.23. It was over €100. Tucked neatly inside the folded €5 note were two crisp €50 bills. I hadn't even noticed. The cashier hadn't noticed. It wasn't just change. He had deliberately, secretly given me this money. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a random act of charity. It was calculated. It was intentional. And that somehow was even more terrifying and confusing than everything else. I sank into one of my rickety kitchen chairs, the €50 notes spread out on the table in front of me. This wasn't a mistake. You don't accidentally fold two €50 bills inside of 5. This was a message. It was his way of showing me that his offer was as real as the money in my hands. The fear I'd been feeling all afternoon started to shift into something else. Something I couldn't name. It was awe, maybe, or just profound, shattering shock. He hadn't just saved me from a moment of humiliation. He had given me breathing room. This money meant I could pay the rent. It meant I could buy groceries. It meant Lily would be okay for another week, maybe 2. He had done all of this without wanting a thank you, without even waiting to see my reaction. He just did it and vanished. So here I am, hours later, long after the sun has gone down. Lily is asleep, and the only sounds are the hum of the old refrigerator and my own typing. I still have the card and the money sitting on the table. I haven't moved them. They feel like artifacts from another dimension. I don't know who Alexander Dubois really is, or why his own sadness made him see mine. I don't understand what will happen tomorrow, or if I even have the courage to make that call. All I know is that this morning, I had €3 and no hope. And tonight, for reasons I may never fully understand, everything has changed.
This day just happened to me. And I needed to write it all down before I started believing it was just a dream.